And welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning, speaking with Kathy Chig and Helene Monsman, both from CAMO, which is the Central American Medical Outreach. And you wonder why we're talking to them on our community. It's because they are rooted right here in Orrville, Ohio. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Kathy, let's start with you. First of all, a little history about CAMO, how it got started.
Well, that story started a long time ago. I hate to admit my age, but back in 1979 to 81, I was in Peace Corps in Honduras. And during that time in Peace Corps, I was an RN, and I worked in a hospital that was a 210-bed hospital with more than 2 people per bed on at least half of the beds. So we were at 150% capacity. And during that time, there were only 4 registered nurses for all those patients. And with that, so if you can imagine, if a nurse took off, now all of a sudden you were with not only 60 patients, but now you're with 120 patients that are under your charge as a registered nurse. And the doctors usually left around 1 p.m. So many times you would be the highest educated nurse for a hospital that served at that point in time, 500,000 people. And we had no heart monitors, we worked with our fingernails and stethoscopes many times. And so it was a difficult 2-year period, but that's where the story began. And it ended at the same time, because when I came home, I said, I never, ever want to come back to this godforsaken place in my life. And I almost lost my faith when I came home due to the experience. I buried 31 children in the last month of my Peace Corps service under the age of 4 due to not having the supplies and materials.
Oh, my. But never say never, right? And
never say never.
Let me just take you back to something you said. I want to make sure I heard that correctly. This hospital was at 150% capacity, because I think the point of capacity is to be able to say, this is how many we can serve. We can't serve more than this number. But you're already serving like half again that many. How do you begin to have the supplies and the manpower when you're just 6 of you?
Well, yeah, and not only that, you're in a developing country, and the developing country doesn't have the funding to be able to provide the main instruments that you need to save a life. So, our anesthesia machine leaked anesthesia. By the time we were done with surgery, we all felt like we had been anesthetized.
Oh, my goodness.
It was just, you had no monitor. One time I sat with my stethoscope on the chest of a woman for from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m. until my ears were bleeding, because she would go into cardiac arrest, and I'd thump her and give her some lidocaine because she was going into VTAC, and I'd bring her back. And the point when my ears started bleeding and I couldn't hear anymore, I had to go home and rest, and 2 hours later she died. That was common. You did what you could do, and you just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And after 2 years of these battles, you kind of tend to think, really, does God exist after a while?
I can imagine that it became very discouraging. For all the successes, you certainly had to say goodbye to some patients as well. And I can understand how you would feel that way and just need a break. What happened, though? Because somewhere between that and the late 70s, early 80s, somehow CAMO was born. How did that happen?
Well, my heritage is I'm Swiss, and also I'm from the Mennonite background, and I still belong to the Mennonite Church. And I have to say that being a Swiss, stubborn, Mennonite, headstrong individual, that God had to use a little bit of His magic to get me to look at this in another perspective. And so I started working at Altman Hospital in the critical care unit, but in that critical care unit, I started seeing the eyes of the patients that I had lost. I started kind of flashing back at moments, if only I had had this in my hands, I could have saved this person. And I started having that. And then I also started having reoccurring dreams where I'd be in my fancy little Torino sports car with racing stripes and a raised hood, and I'd be traveling down those roads to Santa Rosa in my dream. And the dream would happen maybe every night, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. But the dream was a reoccurring dream that I had from 1981 until 1989. And the only thing that changed in that dream was at what place I woke up in the hospital. Sometimes in the wood-burning stoves in the kitchen, sometimes at the vat where they did the laundry, the boiling kettle, sometimes, in the morgue where I had carried those babies, sometimes in the ward. But I would wake up at a different place. And so finally, in from 81 to 89, that occurred. And in 89, I said, okay, all right, I'm stubborn, I'm Swiss, but apparently God is trying to tell me I need to go back and put this to sleep. And I went back in 1989, and that's where the conditions were worse in 89 than they were in 81. And that's where you're just brought to your knees and you say, okay, I can blame God, I can blame society, I can blame corruption, I can blame, you can put the blame on so many things, but if you're competent and capable of helping and you choose not to help, then really who is to blame?
He has his way of getting to our hearts, right, and getting to the heart of the matter. What was different in 1989? How could you make things better this time in Central America?
I couldn't. And that's when I realized that the only way I could is to go back to school to Kent State University and get my business degree and really do this in a way that was well thought out. It wasn't, I needed to be meticulous, I needed to be organized, and I needed to think about this in all the ways that I saw that didn't help. Because remember, I also lived there and I saw all the ramifications of Band-Aid brigades, groups coming in, going out, the lack of continuation of things, the lack of development, the lack of a plan, the lack of all that. And I said, okay, I watched this for 2 years, and these kind of things have been going on for a century. We need to stop, and we need to look at this in an organized manner of how do you really help a developing country in a way that can have long-lasting impact.
I think it's fascinating that you, with your nursing degree, then felt that what you needed was not more medicine, but a business degree to be able to really put together a plan. Am I hearing that right?
You are hearing that right, because I was watching so many things, and in that. It was, I needed to design something that would be more than what I had seen and more than what existed out there. Mm-hmm. And so I really worked hard at getting a model together that really was a full circle type thing, and it didn't just do one component. It just didn't ship medical supplies. It just didn't take medical teams. It didn't just do education and services. What CAMEL does is it helps to fill the gaps where that nurse or that doctor or that educational facility doesn't have what they need so that they can work every day, 5 days a week or 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. What do they need? And so if you take something that they need education, then you take it and you educate them. And not only do you educate, you follow up with them to see what more education they need, and you grow with them throughout the years.
So this isn't drive-by. This is, you are really building relationships and a continued relationship with each of the facilities that are serving the people there. But filling the gap. I love the way you say that. So you are providing education and materials and medicines and so forth, whatever the need happens to be. How do you do that?
Well, you have to be fully committed. You have to be willing to sweat. You have to be willing to get your fingernails dirty. And you have to be willing to have the difficult conversations, no matter where it might be. And so how do you fill that gap? You need to have that relationship with that individual in the country or the place we're serving. If you don't have that relationship, then you're guessing at what the need is. I'm going to tell you a story here, and I'm going to go back a little bit, because this story will help you understand something that has created another way for me to look at things. Mm-hmm. When I was in Peace Corps, my Aunt Jane Orr sent me a sweatshirt. And so now in Peace Corps back in 1980, I had two sweatshirts. I had one that I had been wearing for a year and a new one. And so as I walked up to the public park where the shoe shine men were, there was Don Chepe. Don Chepe was a older man, wrinkled from the sun, and he would always yell out and he'd say, "Hey, gringa, you need your shoes shine." And I'd say, "Hey, Cheppy, my shoes are white. You only have brown and black polish, And so after about a year, it was around Christmas, about 2 months before Christmas, he says, "Hey, gringa." And I said, "Yeah, Don Cheppy, what do you want?" He goes, "I got white shoe polish." And I said, "Oh, cool, all right, so you'll shine my shoes." So it was about a week before Christmas. I got the sweatshirt, and I was walking up through the park, and Don Cheppy was chilled. In Santa Rosa, it can get down to 45, 50 degrees with no heat or anything. And Don Cheppy was shivering, and he had a very thin, worn T-shirt and was shivering. And so I said, "Oh, well, I ran back home, and I got my old sweatshirt, gave it to him. He pulled it on. He felt good, smiled, face lit up. I thought, well, this is good. This is good. This is what God would have wanted me to do." Mm-hmm. And so I go to work, and a week passes, and then I don't see Don Cheppy there. And I say to the guys, "Hey, Don Cheppy, where's Don Cheppy?" And they go, "Oh, Kath, that sweatshirt, that nice sweatshirt you gave him?" I go, "Well, yeah." He sold it. And then he bought enough cane alcohol, and you see Don Cheppy is an alcoholic, or was an alcoholic, and he bought a lot of cane alcohol, and he died that night.
Oh, no.
Now, why do I tell that story? It's about those relationships. If you don't take the time to have that relationship, a very kind act can result in something that doesn't hold that person responsible who you're serving. And so we need to hold people responsible also. And to hold people responsible, hey, heck, you need a relationship with that person. And if you don't have time to do the relationship, you might be hurting them more than you can help them. So when you ask me about filling those gaps, it's about that hard relationship, about really being able to take the time to find out really what somebody needs, not just by my opinion of saying, "Oh, Don Cheppy's cold." Reaction, give him a sweatshirt. "Oh, right. Aren't I great? I feel good about myself."
Yes.
I didn't know him. And it's the same way when we do these projects or these Band-Aid brigades and that. We're going out there and we're saying, "Okay, let's do whatever we think needs to be done." And later on, the people say, "Well, we really didn't need that at all," but we're not going to tell them because, they felt good about themselves, and we want them to come back, and we don't want to hurt their feeling. But once you start knowing the culture and you start knowing the people and you understand that, then you can stay away from those errors. That's how you fill the gaps, the relationships.
Wow, you're really talking about a very tall order because there are so very many people and so many needs. How do you begin to get to know the one-on-one people, to be that up close and personal with the people that you're serving?
Well, you have a staff. In Honduras, we have 38 staff in Honduras. We have social workers that's at our front door when people come in, and we're evaluating those people all the time to see what is going on in their life and what do they really need. And you start asking the tougher questions. But some people, to help them when they need help is so obvious too. For instance. And I'd like it if you want, you can go on our webpage and see the video picture on our Facebook of Nixon. And Nixon is a wonderful story of how we help so many people. Nixon fell out of a mango tree, has a family of 11. They make $2.50 a day after working all day from dusk to dawn. 11 people eat from $2.50. He climbed a mango tree to get some food, fell on his butt, broke his back, laid for 2 days before his brothers could get out of the farm and get a truck, threw him in the back of a pickup truck, traveled 4 hours with a broken back, paraplegic, got to the hospital, and of course, a para doesn't have ability to control bowel and bladder, and so here's 2 days that this young man probably couldn't go or was incontinent, either one of the two, and so he needed 8 screws, and each screw costs $235.
Yes.
That need is pretty much right there in your face. I mean, that's not one that takes a lot of assessment.
Right.
So we were able to get those screws, thank God, to J.C. Tabbitt out of Altman Hospital and get them down there. And on our video, on our Facebook, you'll see Nixon 3 weeks post-op getting out of bed and walking.
Oh, my goodness. That's awesome.
So we do these things. These are the things we do. So that is filling the gap. You had a poor guy, a hard worker, and in a third world country, that we can make a great impact on his life, because bottom line, if we hadn't been there for him, Nixon would die at age 21.
Oh, my. We're speaking with Kathy Chig. She's from CAMO, that's Central American Medical Outreach. We actually have to take a break here. We'll be back after these words. You're listening to Our Community.